Wow, y'all really liked this video, huh? Seriously, reading all your comments and feedback has been amazing. I really want to thank you all for the support. I've also seen some really interesting discussion on who counts as a noble and who is a commoner. I wanted to explore a little more in depth on that and give it its own video, since covering that would have taken too much time. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, go watch this video here to catch up. Also, I just want to mention that this isn't in any way trying to diminish how you interpret the characters. This is just to give my perspective on why I chose to use them or not. So, let's dive into this. With most of the students, I just went with the baseline of their starting class. I figured this was the easiest, most factual way to organize them since that's what the game classifies them as. If I ultimately couldn't decide, I would just default to that. This still leads to some weird placements though. Probably the one I've seen the most comments about is Petra being a commoner. The contradiction comes from her being a princess. That is true, she is royalty in Brigid, but Brigid itself is a vassal state of the Empire through forced subjugation. While Edelgard and other members of the Empire treat Petra with respect and try to honor her role as future queen, she is essentially a hostage to keep Brigid compliant. Ultimately, she doesn't get to enjoy the privileges of nobility and, as far as her status in Fodlan, makes her a regular commoner. Side note, as I mentioned in my video, the Black Eagles have the least amount of commoners to use off the bat. Could you imagine if it was just Byleth and Dorothea to start? That would have been a nightmare. Another standout is Ashe. He is adopted nobility and even only able to attend the academy because Lonato sends him there. Aside from that though, he is born a commoner and after losing his parents resorted to becoming a thief to survive. What's more, since Lonato rebels against the church and is slain, Ashe doesn't even have that to return home to and is essentially on his own again. Honestly though, any story where I would have to turn against Ashe is not one I'd want to do anyways. I could never bring myself to abandon him. The weirdest category to figure out was the Ashen Wolves. They are all disgraced outcasts to society in one way or another. Yuri and Happy thankfully fall pretty easily into the commoner class. Yuri actually has a very similar situation to Ashe, being the adopted son of Count Rowe after growing up a commoner, but seems to be pretty distant from his house and is forging his own path. The real interesting ones are Constance and Balthus. Their starting class is noble, but they are very far from it. Constance's house having collapsed, and Balthus being pretty much on the run and in debt to everyone in Fodlan. Constance would have been a little hard to justify using in my run though, since her ultimate goal is to see her house restored, something antithetical to our mission to dismantle the nobility structure. Balthus, I can see a case for including him in the rebellion. Realistically though, I feel like when the war breaks out, he would stick by the Alliance's side and fight alongside Hilda and Holst, so we wouldn't get to keep him anyways. Not without some serious coin at least. Mercedes and Yuritsa also sit in a very unclear area. As I mentioned, I forgot to look at Yuritsa's starting class of nobles since he's recruited post-time skip. It's even more confusing when you factor in Mercedes starting as a commoner. Both are born into nobility, and both, in a way, fall out of it. Mercedes especially, with her and her mother fleeing House Bartels and becoming full-fledged commoners. Yuritsa stayed and eventually wiped out the entire house. After being taken in by Edelgard to serve as the Death Knight, he is appointed as the head of House Hrim. If I were redoing the run, I would leave him out of it, though I still stand by there being a strong case for him being included, being essentially an outlaw and, in his supports, saying that he will eventually be tried for his crimes, so we can assume any bit of nobility will be stripped from him. Catherine I explained a little bit before, but even if I wanted to actually use her, she'll leave your side in Crimson Flower and fight with the church, so that makes it a pretty easy decision for me. Another unit that was mentioned is Ingrid. Initially, I wasn't even aware of much of her backstory besides losing Glenn in the tragedy of Duscar. The loss of Glenn, and in turn what would have been their marriage, actually leaves her house basically broke. They're still nobles though, even if they are struggling financially. If you actually recruit her into the war on the Empire's side, she'll side with you seeing how Crest and nobility have made her and her family's lives difficult. That sentiment is pretty in line with our beliefs, but that opens the gates for, well, pretty much everyone to be recruited. Students like Sylvain, Lysithea, and Marianne fall into that category very easily. The whole Cresta nobility structure has led to a lot of grief for basically everyone except those who sit at the very top of it all. I think that casts a little too wide of a net for our standards of recruitment, but maybe that at least earns Ingrid a pass from being killed off during the revolution. I also saw Hannmann mentioned as well. He does willingly denounce his nobility and wants to study crests more to make them more accessible, helping to devalue them and lessen the importance of them. I will give him that much. It seems like a decent solution. He's still spent the majority of his life as a noble, and if I'm going to be completely real, his vibes are fucked. Like, he still acts like a noble prick. I think Manuela would be a lot happier if he gets left behind, so I'll stick by her side instead. I think that covers most of the units that needed a bit of extra explanation, but if there's anyone I missed that you still feel like should have been included or not included, we can talk about it more in the comments. I'm so glad to see that I was able to create something so interesting and entertaining for all of you, and that it could actually lead to some substantial growth, and I really look forward to making more stuff like this in the future. Hopefully you're not all here for Fire Emblem exclusively. I play a wide variety of games and want to share that with people. So let me know what you'd like to see content of in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch y'all next time.